Howdy y'all, Luke here. Today I'm going to be doing a comparison between the Annealing Made Perfect Mark II DB and the Quick Anneal. These are both induction annealing machines, and I'm not going to get too deep into the weeds on what annealing is or why you might want to do it, because there's a ton of other videos that cover that. So when I evaluate anything that I'm considering adding to my reloading bench, the two things I'm looking for are an improvement in speed and an improvement in consistency. However, I did want to touch on price, as that's a concern of all of ours. So the AMP with 3 pilots came out to $1,734.85. The pilots are $20 a piece. You need them for a variety of cartridges. Some cartridges share the same pilots, but that's an added expense to keep in mind. The Quick Anneal came out to $1,527.87. So the Quick Anneal is roughly $207 cheaper than the AMP with 3 pilots. Setting up the Quick Anneal is a pretty straightforward process. First thing we're going to do is turn the machine on, and then we set the height here. So you put your case in, then you set this little red 3D printed guide, and you basically adjust the height till it's barely touching that guide. Now, once it's adjusted, they have a spot here where you can write down what your height is, but due to the play in the, I guess the holder, I don't think you're ever going to be able to get the exact same height every time, just due to those being pretty coarse adjustments. But other than that, all you have to do is set your time. So you come over here to menu, you go to set heat time. It's already at 5.3, which is what we use for 308, but you could adjust with these arrows. Then you come over here and you turn Quick Anneal on, hit start, and at that point you start dropping your brass in and annealing it. A quick rundown on how you set up the AMP. You turn it on. And then once it's on, we use the Aztec system. Then we're going to click run. The really cool thing here is they have a database, so you can store all of your settings. So I hit database, 308 federal, load, then you can put it on auto run, which basically means that anytime you stick a case in here, it's going to anneal it. Beyond that, for setup, all you need to do is make sure that you have the proper bushing in place, and you are ready to go. As I mentioned, consistency, speed. When looking at these two machines and evaluating them from those two perspectives, I personally believe that the AMP is not only going to be more consistent, but it is definitely faster. Now, I'm going to dive into these two subjects a little deeper and show you some other videos of the machines in action to show you why I came to those conclusions. As far as consistency goes, I believe that the AMP is more consistent for 2 primary reasons, and that is case centering and case height. As far as the AMP goes, your case holder sits up against the pilot, and the pilot centers the piece of brass. So you get as close to exact same centering in the induction coil and case height on every anneal. With the Quick Anneal, I'm going to show you how the cases can basically end up in different places within the induction coil. Now, as far as height goes on the Quick Anneal, once adjusted and you're using it, I do believe you're getting a very consistent height of anneal. My biggest concern is that I don't believe it is repeatable for 2 reasons. One is that this whole holder moves, which would adjust the case height. And in addition, when you set your case height, you're going off this scale here, this millimeter scale, and I just don't think that it's possible to put that back in the exact same location every single time. So let's say you set up the Quick Anneal to anneal some 308, you go to 6.5, now you want to come back to 308. Are you really going to be able to adjust that height to the exact same place that it was before? Now, we're talking very, very, very fine tolerances, but as you all know, when we're measuring overall length of a loaded round or how much we bump our shoulder, we're looking for very exact numbers. One of the positives to the Quick Anneal machine is that you don't have to buy various pilots for the different cartridges that you're planning to anneal. However, that does lead to a pretty loose fit inside of the induction coil, along with the brass not being centered. As you see, this piece of 308 brass could sit in quite a few different places inside of the coil because it is just sitting on that drop plate at the bottom and there's nothing to center it. That leads me to some concern because as a reloader and a precision rifle reloader, our goal is to do everything exactly the same or as close to exactly the same as possible. And I think when annealing inside this induction coil, it's going to be impossible to always have that brass in the same place. I'm going to go ahead and hit start here. As you saw there, while the case did move some when the induction coil fired up to anneal the brass, it still was fairly offset from center. And that's really my biggest concern consistency-wise is, are you getting a even annealing all the way around the circumference of your brass? I really like the pilot system for a couple of reasons. One is that this hole in the pilot basically keeps your brass centered in the induction coil, which is going to provide more consistency. And in addition, the way the height of the case is set is that you have this brass piece that holds a shell holder. And so when you insert your case, you have that shell holder on pilot contact that you know is going to be exact and precise every single time. On the subject of speed, I'm going to show you. Let's get into it. Now that you've seen those two comparisons, we saw that the AMP annealed the case in roughly 5.8 seconds, the quick anneal in roughly 9.4. Now, doing some quick math, in 2024, I shot roughly 4,100 rounds of precision rifle ammo. It's not counting the other stuff, as precision rifle ammo is all I'm worried about annealing. Now, if we take 4,100 rounds and plan on annealing every single case, with our 9.4 seconds on the quick anneal, that comes out to roughly 10.8 hours. On the AMP, that comes out to roughly 6.6 hours. Now, I'm sure a lot of y'all shoot a lot more than me or a lot less than me, but for me personally, that would be about a 4-hour time savings using the AMP versus the quick anneal. Now, I am aware that these can both be automated per se, the AMP with the AMP mate, the quick anneal. You basically add a stand and put a case feeder up here. And I have not used the AMP mate on the AMP, so I have no comment on that. On the quick anneal, I do have the case feeder attachment, and long story short, it does not work well. If you watch the other video I did on setting up the quick anneal, I get into some of those details. But when it comes to speed, I think the AMP wins by a long shot. One last note that I wanted to touch on consistency-wise is deciding how long to anneal the brass. Now, the AMP uses a Aztec mode, which is where you essentially sacrifice a case and it tells you how long to anneal that brass. The quick anneal, you turn all the lights off and you look for the case to get cherry red hot and you know it's annealed, you subtract 0.2 seconds and there's your anneal time. Now, there's been a lot of arguing back and forth on the internet as to Aztec versus just watching for cherry red. And from the research I've done, I personally do not see that as being a big issue. My biggest concern is that the brass is being annealed the same way every time. If the Rockwell or Vickers hardness is slightly higher or slightly lower than what it truly is supposed to be, I don't think that that's going to make a huge difference in my case life or neck tension. But if your brass is being annealed at significantly different levels from piece to piece, I do see that as a big concern. And that was the biggest issue I had in the past with some of the flame annealers, is that the consistency of the flame varied, and so I didn't believe that I was getting the same consistent anneal on every piece of brass. So when it comes to looking for a cherry red piece of brass or the Aztec mode, I don't really see an advantage to either one. I hope you enjoyed this video. In short, I think these are both great machines and a great step above our old school flame annealing. One of the big benefits too is safety. I don't have concerns running these indoors like I would with a flame annealer where you got to deal with carbon monoxide and that sort of thing. So check them both out, do your research. I'll put links to both of their websites down in the description. You can dig into them. If you have any questions about either of these annealers or my experience with them, or just want to talk precision rifle shooting, feel free to leave a comment or look me up on Instagram at L_CRAW. Hope you enjoyed this video.